Good day, everyone. I'm Attorney Linda Bernard, also Police Commissioner Linda Bernard, coming to you live here from WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. You can reach us. What? Okay, I'm sorry. All right, little technical difficulties here. I apologize, ladies and gentlemen, for that interruption, but technology is not perfect, and clearly we as human beings are not. Again, I'm Attorney Linda Bernard. I am the host of Chop It Up with Attorney Linda Bernard. Welcome today. It's a great day just to breathe, be alive, and of course it's summertime, so it's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. You're watching me live on WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. As you know, we're a global station. You can see us in Africa, Asia, Detroit, and of course throughout the North and South Americas. Having said all that, there are a couple of things that are very important that have happened recently, and I ask you to certainly tune in through either YouTube or Twitch, Twitter, any of those social media platforms. So, as you may know, the Social Security Administration and Congress have recently approved a $200 increase in Social Security payments. That's going to be significant because of the fact that so many people receive Social Security and or Social Security benefits. You don't have to be old to receive Social Security, as you know. If you're disabled, you receive Social Security. You get Social Security disability payments. If you are low income, you get SSI, Social Security Income Supplement. There are a number of different ways that you can receive Social Security payments, but this is good news for everyone. Yesterday, it was reported, that I'm quoting to you, an official with the Social Security Administration said beneficiaries, that's everyone who's receiving any Social Security benefit, is likely to receive a cost of living adjustment closer to 8% at the end of 2022 due to the current rate of inflation. CBS News reported beneficiaries could see an increase of $132.64 per month in early 2023, bringing the average check to about $1,790. So that was extremely good news for many, many people. I think the 7% or 8% is directly related to the inflation that we've seen in our country this year as a result of oil and gas prices, certainly food increases, etc. So that's very, very good news for millions of low-income people, and of course millions of senior citizens as well. So I'm looking forward to being able to report back to you on that as we could as the year moves on and we get more information on this very important development. Many of you around the world have seen, because it was reported throughout the United States and everywhere, that a young police officer by the name of Quartz, was killed in the city of Detroit by a young man, 19 years old, if you can believe this, for no reason at all. As a police commissioner in the city of Detroit, of course, I went to the hospital the minute I got the notice that he was shot, and that he had a serious wound, not a hand injury or something like that. And I sat at the hospital with other officers. There were about 200, 300 officers gathered outside of Sinai Grace Hospital in Detroit. He had been rushed there because that was the nearest trauma center, and that's the protocol for the police department. He as I walked in the door of the hospital, I was met by the head trauma surgeon, a young woman that I knew there, and she told me, she said, Linda, there really wasn't anything we could do. His wound was right here at the upper part of your neck, which is near the the aorta, which is the main artery, of course, to the heart and to the brain. And that he had literally succumbed to his injuries right there as they brought him into the ER, into the trauma surgery suite. It was an interesting experience for me because, of course, we've all had people pass away, many of us, in our families, friends, etc. We've all been to the hospital many, many times. But this was the first time I ever went to the hospital as a result of a gunshot wound. And the first time I had ever gone as a police commissioner for the city of Detroit to, if you will, to support a fallen officer. And it was a surreal experience. From my conversation with the trauma surgeon to my meeting in immediately with the wife of the sworn officer. I mean, her grief was inconsolable. She was weeping. I mean, unbelievably, with her sister there giving her some support. So I didn't interfere with that, but I just stood there and with my hands folded, actually, and prayed. They had put the family, I don't know if you're aware of how this is done, but when a person expires from a gunshot wound or some sort of assault like that, of course, there's a lot of evidence that has to be collected concerning the body. For example, the number of wounds, if any cuts, abrasions, all sorts of things, and they clean up the body so you can see it. You don't see it, with blood on it or debris or dirt or anything like that. Everything is cleaned up, and that happens in a room separate from what they call the viewing room in the hospital. The viewing room is a room about the size of this particular studio that I'm in, except it has a window with blinds in one spot. And I gather they bring the body up to that window, open the blinds, and that's the viewing. There is no other viewing. You don't go in, you don't traditionally touch the body. Those of you who are familiar with John Kennedy's assassination and all the films that have depicted that show you how Jacqueline Kennedy, they came out, they didn't have viewing rooms in, they came out to her and told her that her husband had expired, that the president had died. And she insisted on seeing him, and at first they said, no, you can't go in. But ultimately, the doctors permitted her to go in to the surgical room where the body was, which is what they have in every hospital, and actually touch his body and actually see him, although they had cleaned him up as well. So because it's too traumatic to remember a person, whose body has been devastated, and there's no telling what you'd be looking at. No teeth, no face, no anything. So they clean up the body as much as they can. So she was permitted to go in and see her husband there, even after he had been assassinated, and of course they had to do an autopsy and collect evidence. So Mrs. Courts this week was in the viewing room, as I said earlier, with her sister and one other person, and I was just a fly on the wall. As my heart went out to her, of course there were tears in my eyes and so forth, and so for a few minutes there I went out in the hallway, and there was a gentleman there, an older gentleman, and I introduced myself to him, and he said that he was Officer Courts' dad. His name was Larry. And he was composed He wasn't broken down. I mean, he wasn't crying. He was upset. You could tell because he was hyperventilating. But but I stood there with him and, certainly said how sorry I was, but just being present. Eventually, his older son, another son, came in, and he was there. Me, him, his dad. The mayor came in. The mayor of the city of Detroit, Mike Duggan. Of course, the police chief was there. When I first got there, the police chief wasn't there. He had gone to the scene. He wanted to go and see the scene. So they had rushed him over to the scene. Then he came back to the hospital because he wanted to see exactly where this shooting had occurred and what had happened to this young officer. So the chief is there, and the father is there, and we're just in the hallway. The wife is still in the viewing room. As I said earlier, irreconcilable. They have not opened the blinds. They're waiting for additional family members to come because they don't open the blinds, close the blinds, open the blinds, close the blinds. They let you have one viewing. And they're waiting for the, if you will, critical family members to get there. This young officer was fortunate enough not only to have a wife, but a son, 15 years old, and a daughter, 7. So they had not gotten there yet. Neither had the officer's mother. And when I was talking to Larry, he taught me something, ladies and gentlemen, that I think is important. He said that he didn't tell his wife that their son, had expired. He sent somebody to get her. She didn't know what was going on. She just knew that this person came to her house and said, Larry needs to see you right away. So someone picked her up, and I think that was smart because if he had told her, they're both, of course, more mature people. She might have had an accident or been overcome with despair or grief. So he sent someone to get her. So I learned something from that. Never tell a person who you view as a potentially vulnerable person bad news and expect them to be able to come and address it. Send someone to get them. So there's someone else driving and everything. I think that she knew her son had been shot, but she did not know that he obviously was dead. I don't know if she even knew that he was shot. But anyway, she comes in the door of the hospital and walking toward the back of the hospital where we all were. And he meets her, of course, and then he tells her that their son has expired. It was terrible, just terrible. I can't begin to tell you the level of grief that she expressed. They go back and they put her in a chair because she's getting ready to faint, and they put her in a chair and take her blood pressure, etc., and give her water, to try to hydrate her body. We're still waiting. I'm outside of the viewing room. More family members are there now. When I got there, there was only 2 people there, the wife and the sister. And of course, Larry got there, as I told you. So we're still waiting. More family members, though, are in the viewing room now. But of course, the whole family isn't there yet. The wife's mother gets there. She's very upset when she sees her daughter. The officer is African American. His wife is Caucasian, and of course her mother is Caucasian. So she tries to comfort her daughter, but she's more angry about what happened. The mayor is still standing in the hallway with me. And she walks up to the mayor and she says, "You do something about this. You do something about this. This shouldn't have happened." And then she goes and starts crying very heavily, and other family members comfort her. And the mayor simply nodded and said, "Yes, yes, there is nothing that can be said." But the most powerful moment for me of all was when they found some people brought his children. One's 15, one's 7. Obviously, they can't drive, so they were driven there. And as his little girl comes down the hallway, it comes towards the viewing room, she's screaming, "I want my daddy! I want my daddy!" And she is, spastic. Arms out, almost collapsing. It was an unbelievably painful moment for everyone that was present. I started crying. The mayor had tears in his eyes. Everyone in the hallway was moved by her. I guess an uncle or someone picked her up. Her arms were just failing like this, and her legs were kicking the person. "I want my daddy. I want my daddy." And at that point, it brought back memories for me personally. My mother died when I was 5. She was 32. My father was 34. I remember that day that my mother had just bought a brand new Chevrolet. And my grandmother took care of us during the day, my brother, my sister, and myself. Just bought a brand new car, just brought it off the dealership lot. Was sitting in front of the house. So Mama walked in the house and was standing in the kitchen. And then suddenly, she was a beautiful woman, 5'10", just looked like Rita Hayworth. But anyway, and she just collapsed to the floor. And of course, we called a doctor, and eventually she was diagnosed as having a cerebral hemorrhage, which is an aneurysm. An aneurysm is like a bubble on a tire. As you know, a bubble on a tire can burst any time. The tire explodes, and you lose control of the car. Well, an aneurysm, that bubble on the artery in her brain had burst. And that's what caused her unconsciousness and immediate collapse. So I remember vividly that happening with my mother, and as I watched this girl, I felt the same way. I said, "I want my mother. I want my mommy. I want my mommy. I want mama." So I identified with her personally in the shock and the tragedy of all of it, because there was no coming back. So after all of that, we decided to, and the family was all there. Then they closed the viewing room so they could open the blinds, and of course they could see their loved one. And it was, as I said, the whole experience was surreal. I walked outside. And before I tell you what I had done before I came, let me just take this very brief station break. This is WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world. You can watch us, listen to us, certainly comment and subscribe on Twitch, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, etc. All the social media platforms. I urge you to do so, because this is a great experience, a great opportunity for me to communicate with you and for you to communicate back to me. So back to my story. Officer Courts had expired. So I had come into the hospital like I do most of the time when I go to the hospital to see someone. I knew he had been shot, so I assumed he was going to be in surgery. So usually, as you know, that takes 3 to 10, 5, 6, 8 hours. So I had brought my computer. I didn't have anything. I put on a hoodie, even though it was hot at night, because I know it's always cold in the hospital. Wore a hoodie, computer case, purse with quarters and dollars, so you can get money out of the machines. And so all of this stuff, it never occurred to me that he would be fatally wounded. But he was. So I'm walking out of the hospital, and there are about 300 officers outside, from different jurisdictions even, outside of the city of Detroit. But a lot of DPD. It's a summer night. Everybody's standing around. And we continue to stand around, and because I'm a police commissioner, I go near where the chief is. He just nods to me and acknowledges me, and I nod to him, acknowledge him, and tell him how sorry I am. And the deputy mayor is there. I told you that the mayor was there. The deputy mayor, incidentally, is a man that had just resigned from the police department. He was our first deputy chief. He was the man right under Chief White. So he was an extremely distinguished guy, wonderful man, and the mayor picked him to be the deputy mayor, which was wonderful. Everyone was really happy about that. So the mayor, no, the chief, I'm sorry. By this time, it was late now. We're still standing around under the stars, under the moonlight. The chief asked the 300 of us to gather together. We're there on like a grass little plaza thing. And he asked the head of the chaplain corps, who are the ministers who volunteer to be police chaplains for the city of Detroit. They have a badge. They get to come in. They get to help the family, console the family. That's their job, to help the family of the fallen officer, even when they're just injured, which is a different scenario. So the chief asked that the head chaplain pray. We all bow our heads, and the chaplain says a prayer, and then he asks all of us to say the Lord's Prayer together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And so we say the prayer, and lo and behold, 200 people standing on this open, grassy area, and sprinklers come on. Ooh, all this water. So we're all getting soaking wet just as we finish the Lord's Prayer. As if the Lord is cleansing our soul, cleansing our minds, cleansing our spirits. And of course, when it's amazing. People run from very few things, but when water's coming down, everybody starts to scurry. Just plain water. The sprinklers had come on automatically about 10 o'clock at night, so they must be on a timer. And of course, everyone was getting wet. So this trauma started at about 7 p.m. and it ended for all of us there at about 10 p.m. when the sprinklers came on, and after the Lord's Prayer. And so we all left, except, of course, as you know, the family was inside, and the police representatives and chaplains that were in there with the family continued to console them and work with them and everything. It was a sad, sad day. I don't know exactly how old Officer Quartz was. I haven't seen his date of birth, but actually I will on Monday of this week. There will be a funeral that will be attended by about 7,000 people at Greater Grace Temple on Monday for him. I'll be there. It'll be, certainly a 3 to 5 hour affair. So we'll all be there. I'll be there. As a police commissioner, as a Detroiter, as a person who has tremendous respect for public safety officers and what they do, and has tremendous respect for the families of those officers who make so many, many sacrifices. So we'll all be there on Monday to lay this officer to rest. and it will be a sad day. But what keeps coming back to me, oh, incidentally, he was he was a great guy, great officer, had many commendations. I know there's, sort of mixed sentiments about police these days, but he was a great guy, a good officer, a good father. Many commendations, no citizen complaints. Just an ideal guy. Tall, dark, handsome, thin, obviously with a wonderful family. A happy man. His daughter said, "My hot cocoa won't be there in the morning." Apparently, before he left in the morning, because she was his little princess, he would make her a cup of hot cocoa and put it in the microwave before he left. And so that's what she drank in the morning from her daddy. So these are major shifts for the family and also for the department. The outpouring of support by the community and by the department has been unbelievable. I don't know what occurs in your community around the world when an officer is killed, a public servant is gunned down for no reason whatsoever. But here, we really take these matters to heart. And obviously we take them seriously. So there will be a funeral. There will be a motorcade. All of the, we've got 2,700 police personnel in the city of Detroit. Many of those officers will participate, probably more than 1,000, in that funeral. Clearly more than 1,000. Of course, the focal point will be the officer, and the officer's family. Because how do you go from working out in workout clothes to hearing that you got to rush to the hospital right away, that your husband has been shot? And I want to come back to that in just a minute. But so it's a sad day here in Detroit. When I was coming down the freeway yesterday, those electronic billboards that we have throughout the country now that change the message, and they're in very bright colors, and it's like a 4D or 5D experience like what you have on your cell phone. That experience was on the billboards, on the electronic billboards throughout the Metro Detroit area. The picture of Officer Courts, so that everyone who worked with him, everyone who knew him, everyone who didn't know him, but who shares their the sense of loss that we all have concerning his passing, can nod, say a prayer, in my instance, make the sign of the cross when I saw him on the billboard. So I ask that you pray for the family. Pray for, I know it's different for a boy than for a girl. His 15-year-old son, he didn't show that level of emotion, so I don't know what's happening in him. He's a teenager. He's in rarefied air. They are tending to become young men and don't want to show their emotion like girls do, and etc. But as I said earlier, I identified very closely with his young daughter, because I remember how that felt. So there'll be a major funeral tomorrow, choir, etc. It'll last about at least 4 hours minimum. Probably the whole ceremony between the church service will last 3 to 4 hours. Then the motorcade to the cemetery, that'll be infinitely long. So I tell, if you're in Detroit and listening to this broadcast, please stay off of the major roads. Like they're gonna be coming down 7 Mile I don't know where the family has determined that they're going to be interned at, but listen to don't listen to music. Listen to WJR and find out what the traffic patterns are. Because if you're caught, you know how you feel when you're caught when a train is coming through and it lasts forever, and you're like, doggone it, I wish I had gone a different way. It's going to be twice as long, this motorcade, probably 5 times as long as that long train that you agonized over, that you had to sit there as it went across the tracks and traffic is blocked. Traffic will be blocked, ladies and gentlemen. Traffic will be blocked off, I can assure you. The entire motorcycle patrol will be out. If you cut in, cut out, you will get ticketed. You will get cited. They're not fooling around about this. They want this orderly and uninterrupted, just like when I was talking about when dignitaries, elected officials, like if the governor had passed away or something like that. So listen to find out and look online. Maybe the funeral procession route should be on there. Avoid the whole area. Don't. But the church is at 7 Mile, just west of Evergreen. So I can already tell you, it's going to be a nightmare. Driving will be a nightmare. So don't be late for work. Don't be late picking up your kids. Don't mess up your life. But please avoid that area. Just go as far around it as you possibly can. So that I think the funeral is at 11. So the funeral 12, 1, 2, closer to 3 o'clock. After 2, I'm sure around 3 o'clock the cars will be assembling for the motorcade, and it will be huge. So pay attention. Listen to WJR 950 AM if you're in the southeastern Michigan, Detroit area, so you'll know which area to avoid, which way they're going. If they're going down to Woodlawn Cemetery, where the Honorable and great Rosa Parks is interned, then you know that you have to avoid everything from 7 Mile Road to Woodward and beyond. Woodward will be blocked off, which is the major thoroughfare in America, so that they can get the cars on the Woodward Avenue and then the turn into the cemetery. So you can expect, whatever you do, go 8 Mile up to Livernois, or not even that way, because the funeral procession would be coming that way. You got to figure out a different route. Get on 96, go east or west that way, but avoid Northwest Detroit if you can. Period. So, in closing, regarding that particular issue, may he rest in peace, and may he and his family continue to be blessed. Officer Courts, we love you. Again, this is WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the world, the whole world. So I want you to tune in, watch, listen to us. Certainly comment, subscribe on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, which is probably the way most of you will see us, and other social media platforms. You can comment or subscribe, certainly to our station, and I look forward to those comments and to your feedback, because I'm only as good as you see me, and I want you to see me in my best possible light, and I want to provide information to you that is of critical importance. Now we have paid homage to Officer Courts and his family, but I heard Reverend Jackson speak once about a young man whose father I know, who was killed by another young man. And Jesse said something that was profound. He said there are 2 families that are victimized here today. There's certainly the family of the person who was murdered. And then there's the family of the person who murdered him. So in that instance that Reverend Jackson was speaking about, one person went to the graveyard, and I think a 15-year-old went to prison. In this case, of course, as I told you, Officer Courts will be interned on Monday, but his assailant will also be interned. The circumstances of this killing were that for some reason, the shooter was standing in a second floor room, broke out the window, had an assault style weapon. I didn't know you could do this till I saw the weapon when the police showed us the types of weapon. It's a 9mm weapon that you can put something over it, and on the end of it, and make it. It's called a Draco or something. I think it's Draco, and you can make it. It looks like a 9mm gun, but with attachments. A Draco, and you can make it into a semi-automatic weapon that fires boom, 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 boom. And you can put like this, about the size of this phone. These are all bullets in this, a cartridge thing. I'm calling it a cartridge, and you could attach the cartridge thing to the gun, and then you can fire all the bullets that are in this magazine. It's called a magazine. Pardon me. It's not called a cartridge. It's called a magazine. I don't own a gun or carry a gun, so I'm not familiar with guns personally. But the magazine has multiple bullets, and it allowed him to take what looked like an ordinary gun to me and make it into what is referred to as an assault weapon, because it has the magazine of extra bullets. So, this man breaks out the window, stands there with the gun. There had been, the only reason the officer that Officer Courts and his partner were in the area was because there was a report of, quote, someone called in and said, I hear gunshots. So obviously, I guess he was testing out the gun, because no one else was hurt at that time. The officers pull up. As the squad car is coming up, he fires at the squad car. Now, what would make a person do this? Does he think he's Wyatt Earp? Or what does he think this is, the OK Corral? Who just intentionally, for no reason, fires on a marked police car? The lights, the white, red, white, blue, all that stuff. I mean, blue and white, all that kind of stuff. Fires on the police car. And in the process, he hurts. I mean, the officers hear the fire, and they're beginning to get out of the car. So they start, as they're approaching, they were, of course, other officers are on their way because it said shots fired. But in any event, as they are approaching, the two officers that are in the car that were fired upon are exiting the vehicle so that they can get into a position where they have cover to address this threat of the individual at a higher place firing on them. They're exiting the vehicle. The vehicle is still in reverse. The car actually, the police car actually backs up into another car because the officers have gotten out of the car. She had gotten out of the car when she noticed that her father, the driver, noticed that her partner was hit. She was the driver. Yeah, he was hit. So she's out of the car now. The car's backing up on its own down the street. And so she sees that he's hurt, and she sees the wound, and she's applying pressure to the wound to stop the bleeding because she doesn't want him to bleed out. Of course, because it's near an artery, I think it was actually an artery, he's bleeding profusely, bleed out in a couple of minutes. She's applying both hands with her pressure on the wound, on her knees in the street. The shooter comes out. I guess he thinks he's just going to hurt them both. She looks at him. Now, what would you do? You see a person with an automatic weapon coming out. You're trying to save your partner's life. Do you get your hands up off your partner, reach for your gun to try to deal with the threat to you, or do you continue to apply the pressure to save your partner's life? I would have done what she did. I just would have thought God would take care of me some way. But I'm not going to let a person that's my partner, that I feel responsible for, that feels responsible for me, die. So she made a choice at that moment to brazenly risk her own life as she applied that pressure. The guy comes out of the building from the second floor. He has the weapon. He's walking towards her. And she can't take her hands off the wound without letting him die. She can't reach for her weapon. But other police cars have started to come in the area now. Another police car comes up, recognizes the threat, and shoots the assailant before he can shoot her. To show you the fact that how really great the Detroit Police Department is. I told you earlier that Officer Courts was an African American man. His partner is a white female. She made that split second decision to continue to apply that pressure to that wound, not give up on his life, and risk her own life. And praise the Lord, the other police car came around the corner, saw what was happening, and shot the assailant before he could get his gun back up. He was carrying the gun sort of down as he walked out of the building that he was in. It was like a 2-story building. He walked out the building, carrying the gun in his hand, walked out to see, I guess, his handiwork, and he was shot and killed right there. Now back to the fact that there are 2 victims here. 2 tragedies. The person who shot Officer Courts was 19 years old. He was probably still wetting the bed till he was almost 12. So he's only been even a real person, beyond being a kid, for just a few years, and only been an adult 1 year. 19. The pictures of him show that there doesn't appear to be anything wrong with him. He's tall, he's thin, he's muscular, like 19-year-olds you are. You know what they look like. Perfect, they're perfect. Sort of long curly hair. About my complexion, fairer than me. Almost like Mexican or whatever. He's an African American youth. Light brown skinned young man. No physical disabilities apparent, but obviously he was mentally very, very sick. So my mother used to say all the time, you can't judge a book by its cover, and you can't. You can't assume that a person that appears to have it all going on, tall, slender, muscular, handsome, has it going on. Because obviously he didn't. Obviously he didn't have it going on. Our Chief White, identified the killing as a suicide by cop. I don't quite understand that. I understand it, ladies and gentlemen, but I don't understand it. Because in this situation, I particularly don't understand it. How does a 19-year-old decide that he wants to die by gunfire? What's going on in his head? Is he imagining that he's Frank Gotti or the Terminator or something? What is he thinking? That these real bullets don't kill? I don't think he had ever killed anyone, as I recall from his record. He had never killed anyone or shot anyone before. He had had a gun charge before, but lots of people have gun charges who just don't have a license. I'm not suggesting that's the right thing to do or it's appropriate. It's not appropriate. You could only carry a weapon if you're licensed to do so. And don't shoot people. That's the bottom line. If you have a weapon, don't shoot people. But having said that, he's there. And so he's walking out now, I guess like hunters do, to see their kill. And perhaps kill again. But he stopped. So this young man, who had never killed anybody before, but had been a delinquent, they say there was a warrant pending for him in Islam, but the officers that I talked to, even at the hospital, told me that, and even after the next day that he didn't have any serious criminal charges. We try to paint people one way even before there's been a hearing or a trial or anything. But keep in mind that a warrant is just a charge. It's somebody saying Linda did something. Linda Bernard, well, she did this or she did that or da-da-da-da. Those are allegations. There's many times there's maybe some facts supporting it, but you don't have the whole picture. So when it comes to charges, or particularly against young African American males, as an attorney, I know there's a double standard. Totally. Black kids and black folks get charged with all kinds of crimes that white people are not charged with. So they're not, whatever a black guy does is always more grievous than what a white guy does in many circumstances. Not all, but in many circumstances, that is the case in terms of allegations about people. And we know that. That's a statistical fact. That's not an opinion. That's a fact. So again, lady, I apologize for interrupting my story, but I have to give you a station break. This is WJZZ Cool TV, the coolest station in the entire world. I urge you to watch us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, any and all social media platforms. And to comment, subscribe, let me know what you think, and what your suggestions are. And just let me hear from you. It's always a pleasure for me to engage the community at large. Okay, back to this young man who shot Officer Courts. So he's 19. So now he's dead. Traditionally in Detroit, when an officer is shot or a person is shot, let's say multiple people are shot, you try not to take them all to the same hospital, but the best trauma centers are the best trauma centers, and so ultimately in many instances it occurs. The assailant was dead at the scene. I don't have his autopsy report. I don't know how many times he was shot. It'll all be part of the ultimate file, because personally I always have a problem, like with the man in where was that? Akron, Ohio, shot 66 times in the back while he's riding away. I mean, that kind of excessive use of force is a problem for me. I call it when police turn a person into Swiss cheese. There's so many holes in them that it's like Swiss cheese. Swiss cheese has holes in it. And it doesn't take that much force usually to stop a person. Clearly in the Akron case, which I'm going to have someone on next week to talk about, it's a different situation. But this situation, he was dead at the scene. His corpse was taken also to Sinai Grace Hospital. So as they were trying to find out what happened to him, they were trying to find out about the assailant, get his fingerprints, identify him, see if he had any ID, because we have to notify his family as well, or whoever we can discover that he's related to. So, and even at the scene, even after they shot him, after our officer took him down, we rendered first aid to him, because that's our duty, that's our obligation, to try, as public safety officers, to try to save lives, and certainly not treat a human being as if he's an animal. We even have a duty, of course, as you know, to save animals when we can. That's by statute. But they rendered first aid to him, but his injuries were fatal. And so he's there but of course headed to the morgue. They bring the body there, they pronounce dead, and then they take him to the morgue. And ultimately, as you know, as I said, the same thing happens same thing happened to Officer Courts. But what troubles me is that he was 19. His life's gone. How do you, as Chief White said, decide at 19 years old to decide, that I want to die by suicide by cop? Has he been watching too many video games, playing too many video games, watching too many gangster movies, listening to too much gangster rap, talking about guns and pieces, I guess, whatever they call guns. Although I listen to rap music all the time, I'm drawing a blank now on what they call guns in rap music. I mean, but real bullets kill. And did he think this was, was he getting, was this part of his swag? He had on, the traditional man's T-shirt. I refuse to call it the W beater T-shirt, white T-shirt, long jogging pants, underwear showing at the waist. You know how they like to have the sag. Their pants have to sag. Everyone's pants have to sag these days. Just a cool young man. How did he decide to do this? So for me, perhaps it's because I'm a lawyer. The focus is on the deceased officers. My heart, my sympathy, my prayers go to the deceased officer. But like in any other matter as a lawyer, it's not just the what happened. It's the why. Why did it happen? Why? And it's only if you deal with the why that you can make sure that this thing never happens again. I don't care what it is. Whatever tragedy it is. And what happened in all of the shootings that we've had to address lately, certainly the worst of which was recently was the killing of, I think, 19 children and 3 students in Texas by, quote, a mass shooter. An 18-year-old. So, I mean, how do you make these decisions? What's the why? Why did this happen? So we focus as a community and as a country on the weapon. We focus on the security clearances of the staff. We focus on the security devices that we have in buildings. We focus on the response times, etc. And we focus on the police response, which incidentally, in Texas is very troubling to me. And I'm disappointed that the Department of Justice is not investigating it for criminal complaints against the officers involved. Because I'm sure, I can tell you for a fact, had that happened in Detroit and the officers lollygagged outside for 45 minutes while a gunman was in a schoolhouse and didn't breach the school to try to stop the gunman, that our prosecutor here would prosecute those officers. She would do that. So the Department of Justice, as I said, is looking into this as a civil matter versus as a criminal matter when these issues have occurred. So we'll stay tuned on that. I'll let you know what happens. Thank you for watching me today. Attorney Linda Bernard, also Police Commissioner Linda Bernard, on Chop It Up with attorney Linda Bernard. See you next week. Bye-bye.